Wasabi guys, welcome back to another top 10 commander video. This time we're going to be taking a look at my picks for the 10 best commanders of this year 2022. Since this is my own personal list, I'm going to be leaving off anything from the new Jumpstart set. By the time most people start building decks around those commander options, it's going to be 2023. These are ones that I appreciate. You've heard me talk about most of these all year. It's all about good design, it's all about introducing something new as well. I value power and overall strength in a commander, but to me the ability to win quickly and efficiently isn't always fun in commander. There needs to be something else there for me. So number 10 we have Garrison Starn Kellermorph. It's a continuation of a lot of things we see in red and blue. If you like Niv Mizzet, you can kind of add on to Niv Mizzet with a strategy that's focusing on the damage that you're dealing. This commander has a built-in way of dealing that additional damage. You also have the Ward 2, which gives it a layer of protection. What's cool about this commander option is that you have a lot of sweepers that just deal 1 damage to all creatures. You have a lot of cards that deal 1 damage to each opponent. This basically turns 1 damage into 3. Only being a 3-mana commander, it's incredibly efficient. One of the things holding it back is that this is a crossover card, and I'm not the biggest fan of having crossover cards as playable in Commander. That being said, this one is just so much fun. If it were anything else, if it were part of the actual Magic multiverse, I'm certain that even more people would consider it. Number 9, we have Giada, Font of Hope from Streets of New Capenna. This one to me wins out when it comes to the New Capenna sets, the main set and the Commander product of course. You have some interesting creative abilities, but with Giada you have an Angel Commander that kind of breaks the mold, where instead of waiting to get to turn 5 or 6 to play more powerful Angels, you only need to get to turn 2 at the latest, and you have basically a mana dork for your Angels. You have an Angel mana dork that makes it easier to get all of your other Angels out there. A very beginner-friendly commander, pretty easy to understand. You play more Angels, those Angels get bigger for each other Angel, and I believe that's what they needed all along. They needed some kind of setup commander, and this is what they got. The only way this could be better is if it could get you to your next Angels, but that's not really that bad. We are in mono white. You're getting some pretty good abilities here. Number 8 is Light Paws Emperor's Voice, another mono-white commander option, and this time from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. We ended up getting a pretty good variety from that set. We got vehicles, we got ninjas, we had enchantment support. With Light Paws, you have the ultimate mono-white aura commander. And it goes back to what I was just saying with Giada. What Giada was lacking is maybe a way to help you get to your next Angels. She's really just a pure setup commander. Light Paws is the opposite. Provided you have auras to cast, you can get to your other auras. Not a super complicated commander to understand, and that's the trend with mono white. You do one thing really well and it's pretty easy to grasp. Number 7 is another commander option from Neon Dynasty. Brought them up for a reason. We have another great ninja commander. Why I like it is because it does a little bit of both of what I just mentioned. You have a great setup, and you have a way to get to your next spells. Whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You put 1 into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. The ninjutsu of 4 mana is awesome if you like playing non-ninja creatures. And that's the ultimate appeal here for Satoru Umezawa. You get to play ninjutsu with non-ninjutsu cards. If you like high mana cost creatures like the Eldrazi, or really any creature that's way more expensive than 4 mana, this is a way to cheat those into play while also playing a lot of unblockable creatures. Gives you a healthy mix of what we liked about ninja decks, but giving you better creatures than what we typically received before. You might have noticed something about the commander options so far. They're all pretty cheap to get out there. 2 mana, 3 mana, it makes it very easy to then replay them later in the game. And especially if they're important for your strategy, you want to be able to replay them often. Only being 3 mana means you can throw them out there and get back to ninjutsu. Number 6, we have Ivy, Gleeful Spell Thief. Dominaria United is my personal favorite set of the year because it gave you plenty of power and it gave you plenty of creative strategies. What I like about Ivy here is that you get hints of Zada Hedron Grinder. This is kind of the reverse of that, where you target another creature and then Ivy gets the copy. With auras you can abuse those, with mutate you can abuse those, which I think is even stronger because you get more of a lasting board presence. And it follows that trend of only being a 2-mana commander. We had so many 2-mana commanders from Dominaria United, and they all seem to be pretty decent. This one I would say is without a doubt one of the strongest in the set. Number 5 is Sheoldred the Apocalypse. This is an example of pure power. Super simple, but the synergies are outrageous. This is mono black, and usually what happens in mono black, you've heard me say this before in my reviews for the set, you're breaking the rule of what is a typical cost in black. You're going to have to pay life to draw cards in excess. So you were never going to be able to draw cards the same way that blue would draw cards for the same amount of mana. Sheoldred says, okay, Sign in Blood, a card where the downside was losing life. You actually gain life after doing this. So that reason alone is why I think Shoulder the Apocalypse is so crazy. But it doesn't end there, because whenever an opponent draws a card, they have to lose 2 life. In typical Praetor fashion, it's a one-sided advantage for you. The most expensive commander so far, and that's saying something because it's only 4 mana. The power creep is noticeable, everything has to be cheaper and faster, more powerful, and with Shoulder the Apocalypse and pretty much every commander that we've seen so far, compare that to what we've had 10 years ago, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Number 4, Shurikai Genesis Engine, from the Neon Dynasty commander product. What we have here is maybe not the most powerful commander option, but definitely one of the most creative, which goes to show that there was a lot to like about Neon Dynasty overall. With the returning focus being vehicles for the set, it was only a matter of time before we actually got a vehicle that could be a commander. And while Kaladesh may go down as one of the most infamous sets for introducing vehicles in a fantasy setting, I have to admit this was a fun commander to build around. Very few strategies where I just went all in on the vehicles. With this one, you can and you're rewarded for it. And it's an engine that's quite literally an engine. Again, outside of being able to crew it up, you're not getting a ton of power compared to some of these other commanders. But the creativity around just what this commander is the reason why I love it, and it's the reason why I think it's one of the best commanders we got all year. Number 3 is Joda the Unifier. Another special commander from Dominaria United. This time we're going all in on the legendary theme. You kind of have a coat of arms for legendary creatures, and you're getting a sort of legendary cascade for your other spells. That's what's fun for people, cascade effects, anything that lets you get to your next spells. That's what's powerful about a lot of commanders, is that they don't just sit on the field, they make your deck work. You know, Shurikai was an engine. This gets you extra value every time you play a legendary spell. And in 5 colors, you have plenty to choose from. This is what works for a lot of players. They just want to have an open-ended commander where you're not really tied down into a specific strategy. Although this, of course, does reward you for legendary stuff. There's so many different cards that fit into that. So you're not going to have 2 players who have the exact same deck. If there's one thing that annoys me in Commander, it's when everyone's playing the same deck with the same exact cards, because they went to edhrec.com and they noticed that everyone's playing the same exact 60 cards, or they went and copy and pasted decks from one of the top YouTubers. So for that, I think Joda gets some extra points. Anytime we get these play all 5 colors and over-the-top commanders, you can be certain that a ton of people are going to play it. Number 2 is Miriam Sentinel Worm from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. Of course, this is from another crossover, but I think a lot of people have accepted Dungeons & Dragons over really anything else because it feels seamless compared to a lot of other things. Miriam Sentinel Worm fits in. It's a dragon spirit. For the set Battle for Baldur's Gate, we had a heavy emphasis on dragons, and this is probably the most popular of them because you can take advantage of legendary dragons by making non-legendary copies of them. And of course, you could make copies of other dragons, but if a card says you don't have to pay attention to the legend rule, then you should probably take that to mean that that's probably the way you should build around it. And why wouldn't you? Legendary dragons are over the top powerful. And usually when Wizards make something legendary, it's because they don't want you to have more than one of it on the field at the same time. So that's really fun. I just like breaking the rules. Could it be considered power creep when you occasionally break the rules? Maybe. You are still paying 6 mana for a commander. This and Joda are the 2 most expensive commanders that I consider to be really good commanders. And we're not even really talking about expensive, because again, you go back to what Commander was like 10 years ago, and so many people were playing 6 mana, 7 mana commanders, and that was the status quo. You had some that were even more expensive. If you ever played with a 5-color deck 10 years ago, you know exactly what I'm talking about in this specific commander I'm talking about. So if 6 mana is the most expensive and you get all this power, it's definitely worth it. And oh yeah, it has Ward too. But the number 1 commander this year is from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty Ishin, 2 Heavens is 1. Pretty much every commander here did something new, and Anishin also has the benefit of being only 3 mana. If a creature attacking causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. This checks almost every single box of what I would consider to be an amazing commander. The only one it doesn't is your ability to get to your next spells, which I forgive on a 3 mana commander that is 3 different colors, and allows you to experiment to the fullest of what you would expect to get out of attack triggers. Very aggressive colors. This has been a theme in the making for a long time as well. We have a lot of you get an additional trigger cards on ETB, on cast triggers. This time getting one off of an attack trigger made so much sense. And if that's all that Ishin is for your deck, and that's okay because it can take average creatures with so-so attack triggers, double them up and make them suddenly really amazing. And that's ultimately the point of a good commander, is to make everything else in your deck much better. It does have the unfair advantage like a lot of other Neon Dynasty cards have, where it's been out for most of the year so everyone's been able to experiment with it, really get a feel for its power. But I think even compared to a lot of the newer sets, it still stands out, it's still going to win hearts. Anishin Two Heavens is one, my personal favorite commander for 2022. Quick honorable mentions, of course, we have the Brothers' War. I am a fan of Mishra Tamer of Makfawa, but in reviewing it, I did point out it is a bit more expensive at that 5 mana. You get a good ward ability, and Unearthing Artifacts has a lot of cool combo potential. The Brothers' War set does suffer in the fact that it's still brand new, but I will point out that Urza Lord Protector, and where you can build a deck where your whole focus is to meld into making that Planeswalker, is really exciting. So this for me is like right up there. This and Mishra, you could probably consider them 11 and 12. That's going to do it for my top 10 picks all year, the best commanders of 2022. Please let me know what you think in the comment section below. Commander Void here signing off. I will see you all next time.